The scent of garlic and herbs hit me like a wall as I unlocked the apartment door. It was a foreign smell in our usually sterile, takeout container-laden kitchen. Confusion morphed into surprise, then a kind of cautious curiosity. Melissa, my girlfriend of 3 years, was cooking? I peered around the corner, and the sight that greeted me was so unexpected it felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Melissa, usually glued to her phone, was flitting around the kitchen with an unfamiliar energy. Pans sizzled on the stove, a colorful salad was being tossed with practiced hands, and the aroma of something delicious, something undeniably homemade, filled the air. But it wasn't the cooking itself that was the revelation. It was the atmosphere. It was the way she hummed along to the music playing softly in the background, a carefree melody that I'd never heard her hum before. It was the way she moved, with a grace and fluidity that belied her usual slumped posture and tired sighs. And then, there he was, Eric, her best friend, lounging at the kitchen counter, a glass of wine in his hand, a lazy smile on his face. It wasn't the cooking itself. It was the laughter, the easy smiles, the way she tasted the sauce off the spoon like they were in a rom-com. And it hit me. She could do this. She just didn't want to do it for me. They were laughing, sharing a joke that I wasn't privy to, their eyes sparkling with a shared amusement that I'd rarely witnessed in our own interactions. Melissa, the woman who claimed to be not the affectionate type, was leaning against the counter, her body angled towards Eric, her hand brushing his arm with a casual intimacy that sent a pang of something unfamiliar through my chest. She dipped a spoon into the sauce simmering on the stove, her movements graceful, almost theatrical. She brought the spoon to her lips, her eyes closing as she savored the flavor, a soft moan escaping her lips. Then she offered the spoon to Eric, their fingers brushing again as he took it, their eyes locking in a moment of shared pleasure that felt strangely intimate. Melissa, the woman who claimed to be too tired to cook, too busy to plan a date, too practical for grand gestures, was clearly capable of effort. She could cook, she could laugh, she could be affectionate. She just didn't want to do it for me. The realization wasn't accompanied by anger, not exactly. It was more of a quiet sadness, a dull ache in the chest that spread through my body like a slow poison. I had spent years trying to understand her, to accept her excuses, to convince myself that her lack of effort was just her way. But now, seeing her with Eric, seeing the effortless ease with which she expressed affection, the genuine joy she radiated in his presence, I understood. It wasn't about her being not the affectionate type. It was about her not being affectionate with me. I stood there for a moment, watching them, my heart heavy with a newfound understanding. And then, quietly, I turned and walked away, the scent of garlic and herbs lingering in the air, a bitter reminder of the effort that was never meant for me. The shift in my behavior was subtle, at first, a gradual withdrawal that mirrored the slow fading of my feelings. I stopped asking Melissa for things, stopped offering to pick up groceries on my way home, stopped reminding her about appointments she'd inevitably forget. The small acts of service, the little gestures of affection that I'd once offered freely, were now withheld, not out of anger, but out of a quiet resignation. The change didn't go unnoticed. Melissa, used to my accommodating nature, my willingness to go the extra mile, started to notice the shift in the tides. She'd make requests, the kind she'd always taken for granted, and be met with a casual indifference that was foreign to our dynamic. She asked me to pick up her dry cleaning. Nah, too much effort, I said, mimicking her usual excuse. The look on her face was priceless, like I'd suddenly sprouted horns. It was a small act of rebellion, a subtle mirroring of her own behavior. The look on her face was a mixture of confusion, annoyance, and a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like panic. It was as if she was suddenly realizing that the rules of the game had changed, and she was no longer in control. "What do you mean, too much effort, she'd asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowed. "Exactly what I said," I'd reply, my voice casual, my expression unreadable. "I'm tired. It's a long way. Too much effort." The words, her own words, hung in the air between us, a stark reminder of her own neglect, her own lack of consideration. She opened her mouth to protest, to argue, to demand the service she had come to expect, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. The pattern continued. Requests for favors were met with shrugs, offers to help were declined with a polite, "I'm good," and the small gestures of affection, the good morning texts, the spontaneous hugs, were replaced by a polite distance, a quiet withdrawal that spoke volumes. Melissa, used to being the center of attention, the one who dictated the terms of the relationship, found herself floundering in this new dynamic. She tried to regain control, to reassert her dominance, but her efforts were met with a calm indifference that was more effective than any argument. The awkward silences stretched between us, punctuated by her frustrated sighs and my non-committal grunts. The easy banter that had once characterized our relationship was replaced by stilted conversations, filled with forced smiles and veiled accusations. And as I watched her struggle to adapt to this new reality, a quiet satisfaction bloomed within me. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about reclaiming my own power, about setting boundaries, about refusing to be taken for granted any longer. The silent treatment, I realized, was a powerful weapon. It was a way of communicating without words, of expressing my discontent without resorting to arguments or accusations. It was a way of letting Melissa know, in no uncertain terms, that the game had changed and I was no longer willing to play by her rules. Emma was a breath of fresh air, a burst of sunshine in the increasingly gloomy landscape of my relationship with Melissa. We'd been friends since college, a bond forged over late-night study sessions, shared laughter, and a mutual appreciation for bad horror movies. She was the kind of person who could make you laugh until your sides ached, the kind who'd listen without judgment, the kind who'd bring you soup when you were sick and actually remember to take the spoon out of the bowl before handing it to you. Emma's always been there, funny, smart, down to earth, and she actually listens when I talk. Imagine that. The contrast between Emma and Melissa was stark, like comparing a vibrant watercolor to a faded photograph. Where Melissa was self-absorbed and demanding, Emma was thoughtful and considerate. Where Melissa exuded an air of entitlement, Emma radiated genuine warmth and appreciation. And where Melissa's conversations revolved around herself, her achievements, her desires, Emma was genuinely interested in others, her questions insightful, her listening skills unparalleled. I found myself gravitating towards Emma, seeking out her company, her easy laughter a welcome antidote to the strained silences that had become the soundtrack of my relationship with Melissa. We'd grab coffee, catch a movie, or just hang out at her apartment, talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing effortlessly between us. "You seem lighter," Emma remarked one afternoon as we were strolling through the park, the crisp autumn air swirling fallen leaves around our feet. "Lighter?" I echoed, surprised by her observation. "Yeah," she said, her eyes twinkling with concern. "More relaxed, like a weight has been lifted." I thought about her words, realizing she was right. The constant tension, the underlying resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface of my relationship with Melissa, had somehow dissipated in Emma's presence. With Emma, I could be myself, my true self, without the need to impress, to perform, to constantly prove my worth. "I guess I am," I admitted, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "It's nice." "Good," she said, her smile widening. "You deserve nice." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me. I deserved nice. I deserved someone who appreciated me, who valued my company, who made an effort, however small, to show me that I mattered. And as I looked at Emma, her eyes sparkling with genuine warmth and affection, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone who could give me that. It was Friday night, movie night, or at least it was supposed to be. Melissa and I had a ritual, a standing date to order takeout, watch terrible horror movies, and make fun of the predictable plot lines and questionable acting. It was a simple tradition, a small way to connect after a long week. a tiny flicker of effort in the vast expanse of her indifference. But lately, even that small effort had become too much. Movie night, Melissa bailed, citing exhaustion. Emma was free. Popcorn, bad movies, and actual conversation. A much better night, all things considered. The text arrived just as I was about to leave work. So sorry, babe. Totally exhausted. Rain check? It was a familiar refrain, a well-rehearsed excuse that had become as predictable as the jump scares in the movies we were supposed to be watching. I stared at the message, a wave of disappointment washing over me. It wasn't about the movie, not really. It was about the missed opportunity to connect, the lack of effort, the subtle reminder that I was not a priority in her life. And then, an idea sparked in my mind. A small act of rebellion against the apathy that had become the defining characteristic of our relationship. "Hey, Emma," I typed, my fingers flying across the screen. "Melissa bailed on movie night. You up for some terrible horror and questionable life choices?" Her response was almost instantaneous. "Always up for some cinematic torture. Popcorn's on me." An hour later, I was sprawled on Emma's couch, a bowl of popcorn in my lap, a cheesy horror movie playing on the screen. We were laughing, exchanging witty commentary, and genuinely enjoying each other's company. There were no awkward silences, no forced smiles, no underlying tension. Just easy conversation, shared laughter, and a comfortable companionship that felt strangely right. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversation flowing effortlessly from work gossip to childhood memories to our shared love of bad horror movies. Emma listened with genuine interest, her questions insightful, her laughter contagious. I found myself opening up to her, sharing details about my life, my frustrations, my dreams, in a way that I hadn't done with Melissa in years. As the credits rolled on the final movie, a sense of contentment settled over me. It wasn't the adrenaline rush of a thrilling horror flick, nor the satisfaction of a gourmet meal. It was the quiet comfort of genuine connection, the simple pleasure of being heard, of being valued, of being appreciated. The shift in my social life was as subtle as the change in my demeanor. Where I had once prioritized Melissa, rearranging my schedule to accommodate her whims, I now found myself gravitating towards Emma, our shared interests and easy companionship a welcome escape from the emotional quicksand of my relationship. We started hanging out more often, our impromptu movie nights turning into regular coffee dates, museum visits, and long walks through the city. With Emma, there was no need to pretend, no need to perform. I could be myself, my true self, with all my quirks and flaws, and she would laugh with me, not at me. Melissa, accustomed to being the center of my world, started to notice the change. She'd find me smiling at my phone, a genuine smile that didn't quite reach my eyes when I was with her. She'd overhear me talking about my plans, my voice animated with an enthusiasm that was absent from our conversations. And she'd see the way I looked at Emma, my eyes filled with a warmth and appreciation that she had long since ceased to inspire. She saw me laughing at my phone. She asked who it was. "Emma," I said, just her name, no explanation needed. The flicker of something in her eyes was interesting. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we were at a cafe, supposedly enjoying a leisurely brunch. But the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, the silence punctuated by the clinking of silverware and Melissa's frustrated sighs. I was texting Emma, making plans for the evening, a smile tugging at my lips as I read her witty replies. Melissa, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, leaned over and peered at my phone. "Who are you texting?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowed. "Emma?" I replied, my voice casual, my eyes not leaving the screen. "Emma?" she echoed, her voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "What are you two talking about?" "Just stuff," I said, deliberately vague. "Movie plans, you know, the usual." She didn't press further, but the flicker of something in her eyes, a mix of annoyance, jealousy, and perhaps a hint of fear, was not lost on me. It was the first crack in her facade, the first sign that she was starting to realize that her hold on me was slipping. And as I continued to text Emma, making plans for another evening of laughter and genuine connection, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. I was no longer bound by the invisible chains of Melissa's indifference, no longer confined to the emotional wasteland of our relationship. I was free to explore new connections, to cultivate friendships, to discover the joy of being appreciated, of being valued, of being seen. Melissa, accustomed to a certain level of apathy in our relationship, began to notice the discrepancy. It wasn't a dramatic shift, more like a gradual awakening. She started watching me, not with suspicion at first, but with a kind of puzzled curiosity. She noticed the easy laughter that flowed freely when I was with Emma, the kind that erupted spontaneously, without a trace of self-consciousness. She observed the animated way I'd tell stories, my hands gesturing, my eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, a stark contrast to the monotonous drone I reserved for our dinner table conversations. She saw the way I looked at Emma, my gaze lingering, my smile genuine, my eyes reflecting a warmth and affection that she hadn't seen directed at her in, well, she couldn't remember when. Melissa, used to being the passive recipient of my attention, now found herself on the outside looking in, a spectator to a connection that she had once taken for granted. The realization was dawning on her, slowly but surely, like a sunrise creeping over the horizon, illuminating the neglected corners of our relationship, exposing the cracks in the foundation she had so carelessly built. She started comparing, not consciously at first, but with a growing unease that gnawed at the edges of her complacency. She compared the effortless laughter with the strained silences, the genuine smiles with the forced pleasantries, the attentive gestures with the absent-minded distractions. And as the comparison became clearer, the realization grew sharper, a thorn in her side, a constant reminder of the love she had neglected, the connection she had allowed to wither, the shift in my behavior, the subtle realignment of my affections, was a mirror reflecting her own failings, her own lack of effort, her own inability to appreciate the man who had loved her, despite her best efforts to push him away. I remember the first time she baked for me. It was a Wednesday evening, a typical hump day slump, and I was venting about a particularly frustrating client. Emma, instead of offering empty platitudes or changing the subject, listened patiently, her eyes filled with understanding, her occasional nods and murmurs encouraging me to continue. And then, as I was about to leave, she presented me with a small tin, its lid adorned with a hand-drawn doodle of a smiling cookie. Inside, nestled amongst crinkled tissue paper, were a dozen chocolate chip cookies, still warm from the oven, their aroma filling the air with a comforting sweetness. "I thought you might need a little pick-me-up," she said, her cheeks flushed with a shy smile. I stared at the cookies, then at her, a wave of emotion washing over me. It wasn't just the cookies themselves, although they were undeniably delicious. It was the gesture, the thoughtfulness behind it, the simple act of kindness that spoke volumes about her genuine affection. Melissa, on the other hand, seemed to view any form of effort as an insurmountable chore. Birthdays were met with generic gift cards, anniversaries were forgotten, and any request for a small favor was met with a litany of excuses and a weary sigh. Her love language, if it could be called that, was one of passive acceptance, a silent expectation that I would continue to give without receiving anything in return. The smell of burnt garlic was my first clue. It wasn't the enticing aroma of a lovingly prepared meal, but rather the acrid scent of culinary distress. I walked into the apartment to find Melissa in the kitchen, a look of frustrated determination on her face as she frantically stirred a pot of something that was rapidly turning from red to black. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of amusement. Melissa jumped, startled by my unexpected arrival. "Oh, hey," she said, a forced smile plastered on her face. "I'm cooking." "Cooking?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Since when?" "Since now," she replied, her voice a little too high, her eyes darting nervously towards the smoking pot. "I thought I'd surprise you." "Surprise me?" I repeated, my voice flat. "With what? A fire alarm test?" She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound that was a far cry from the genuine laughter I had shared with Emma. "No, silly," she said, her voice regaining a semblance of composure. "With dinner. I'm making pasta." "Pasta?" I said, my gaze fixed on the pot, its contents bubbling ominously. "That looks interesting." "It's a work in progress," she admitted, her cheeks flushing with a hint of shame. "I'm not exactly a chef, you know." "No," I agreed, my voice devoid of emotion. "I know." She made pasta, burnt the sauce. It was cute, in a pathetic kind of way. "Why now?" I asked, my voice flat. She didn't have an answer. We sat down at the table, the burnt offering of pasta placed between us like a peace offering gone wrong. I took a bite. The flavors a strange mix of overcooked noodles and acrid sauce. It was, to put it mildly, not good. "So?" Melissa asked, her eyes searching mine for a hint of approval, a flicker of the appreciation she had once taken for granted. "It's—" I hesitated, searching for a diplomatic response. "It's interesting." "Interesting?" she echoed, her voice laced with disappointment. "That's all you can say?" "What do you want me to say, Melissa?" I asked, my voice finally betraying a hint of the frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. "That it's delicious? That it's the best pasta I've ever had? That it makes up for years of neglected birthdays, forgotten anniversaries, and a complete lack of effort in our relationship?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise, her face paling. I I was trying," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Trying?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Why now, Melissa? Why, after all this time, are you suddenly trying?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth, undeniable and damning, hung in the air between us. She was trying because she was losing me, because she was finally realizing that her apathy, her neglect, had pushed me away, into the arms of someone who actually cared. "You're trying because you're scared," I said, my voice softening, the anger replaced by a weary sadness. "You're scared of losing me, of being alone, of facing the consequences of your own actions." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face a mask of regret. But it was too late. The damage had been done, the trust broken, the connection severed. The burnt pasta, a symbol of her belated and half-hearted attempt to salvage our relationship, lay between us, a testament to the effort that was never made, the love that was never truly given. It was a chance encounter, a twist of fate that felt more like a carefully orchestrated scene in a play. Melissa walked into the very cafe where Emma and I were enjoying a lazy Sunday brunch. I saw her first, the surprise registering in my eyes before a flicker of something I couldn't quite define crossed my face. Emma, following my gaze, turned to see Melissa frozen in the doorway, her expression a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning realization. Melissa, after a moment of hesitation, approached our table, her steps hesitant, her smile strained. "Adam," she said, her voice a little too high. "Fancy meeting you here." "Melissa," I acknowledged, my voice carefully neutral. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, well," she said, her eyes darting between Emma and me. "I was in the neighborhood." The air crackled with tension, the unspoken words hanging heavy between us. Emma, ever gracious, broke the silence. "Hi, Melissa," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "It's nice to see you." Melissa's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You too, Emma," she replied, her voice laced with a hint of forced politeness. She saw us together, laughing, talking, genuinely enjoying each other's company. The contrast was stark. She was the past, Emma was the present, and the present was effortless. The conversation that followed was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences and forced smiles. Melissa, clearly uncomfortable, fidgeted in her chair, her eyes darting around the cafe, avoiding our gaze. She couldn't help but compare, couldn't help but notice the easy banter between Emma and me, the genuine laughter that flowed freely, the comfortable silences that spoke volumes about our shared connection. As Melissa excused herself, mumbling something about a forgotten errand, I watched her walk away. Her shoulders slumped, her head bowed, the realization of what she had lost, of what she had thrown away with her apathy and neglect was etched on her face, a painful reminder of the love that had slipped through her fingers. And as I turned back to Emma, her eyes sparkling with warmth and understanding, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had chosen the present, the effortless joy of a genuine connection, the love that was freely given, the love that I deserved. Chapter 11. The Breakdown. The confrontation, when it finally came, was less explosive and more like a slow leak, a gradual release of pressure that had been building for months. Melissa, unable to ignore the shift in our dynamic any longer, cornered me one evening after a particularly strained dinner of takeout sushi. "You're different," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and hurt. "You don't look at me the same way." Finally, the inevitable confrontation. I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. "Different how?" I asked, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil that her words stirred within me. "You're distant?" she said, her voice cracking. "You barely talk to me anymore. You're always with Emma." "And that bothers you?" I asked, unable to keep the hint of challenge out of my voice. "Of course it bothers me," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "You're my boyfriend. You're supposed to… She faltered, unable to articulate the expectations she had never voiced, the needs she had never expressed. "To what, Melissa?" I pressed, my voice gentle but firm. "To be the attentive boyfriend you never appreciated. To make the effort you never reciprocated. To pretend that I'm happy in a relationship where I feel more like a roommate than a partner?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise, her face paling. The truth, unspoken for so long, hung heavy in the air between us, a suffocating blanket of neglected needs and unfulfilled expectations. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't you?" I asked, my voice filled with a quiet sadness. "I've been telling you for years, Melissa. I've been asking, begging, pleading for you to make an effort, to show me that you care, to love me the way I need to be loved." I paused, taking a deep breath, steeling myself for the words that had been bottled up for so long. "Because I realized something," I said, my voice calm, detached. "I wasn't asking for too much. You just didn't want to do it for me." She opened her mouth to protest, to offer the usual excuses, but I stopped her with a raised hand. "Don't," I said, my voice firm. "Don't insult me with your excuses. I saw you with Eric. I saw the effort you put in, the laughter, the affection, the love." Her eyes widened, her face flushing with shame. "That was different," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Different how, Melissa?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because he's not your boyfriend? Because you don't have a history with him? Because you haven't taken him for granted the way you've taken me?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze, the truth of my words burning like acid. "But Emma did," I added, the words hanging in the air between us, a stark reminder of the contrast, the alternative, the love that was waiting for me, the love that I deserved. Melissa finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain, regret, and a dawning realization that she had lost something precious, something irreplaceable. But it was too late. The confession had been made, the truth laid bare, the damage done. And I, the man who had loved her despite her best efforts to push me away, was finally ready to move on. Melissa, faced with the imminent loss of the relationship she had so carelessly neglected, resorted to the oldest trick in the book, the desperate plea for another chance. "Please, Adam," she begged, her voice thick with tears, her eyes wide with a fear that I'd never seen before. "Don't leave me, I'll change, I promise." She reached for my hand, her touch tentative, hesitant, a stark contrast to the casual intimacy she had so readily displayed with Eric. I looked at her hand, her manicured nails, the expensive rings she adorned herself with, and felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. She promised to be better, to make an effort, to try. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. Change, I echoed, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. How, Melissa? How will you change? Will you suddenly become the affectionate, attentive girlfriend you never were? Will you magically transform into the woman who cooks elaborate meals, remembers birthdays, and actually listens when I talk? She flinched at my words, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of her own neglect. I can try, she stammered, her voice cracking. I can learn. I can be better. Try? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You've had years to try, Melissa. Years to make an effort, to show me that you care. But you didn't. You chose apathy. You chose neglect. You chose Eric. The mention of his name hung in the air between us, a stark reminder of the contrast, the alternative, the love that was waiting for me, the love that I deserved. It's too late, Melissa, I said, my voice gentle but firm. The damage is done. The trust is broken. And honestly, I don't believe you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and disbelief. You don't believe me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. No, I said, meeting her gaze, my eyes filled with a quiet sadness. I don't, because I've heard it all before. The promises, the excuses, the empty words. And I'm tired of it, Melissa. I'm tired of being the only one making an effort, the only one fighting for a relationship that you clearly don't value. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer another plea, another promise, but I stopped her with a raised hand. It's over, Melissa, I said, my voice firm, final. I'm done, and this time, I mean it. She looked at me, her face a mask of despair, the realization of her loss finally sinking in. But it was too late. The plea had been made, the promises offered, but the damage was irreversible. And I, the man who had loved her despite her best efforts to push me away, was finally free. The breakup with Melissa was a clean break, a surgical removal of a tumor that had been slowly poisoning my life. There were no dramatic scenes, no tearful reconciliations, just a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. And in the aftermath, a strange sense of peace settled over me, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. It was in this newfound clarity that I realized the depth of my feelings for Emma. It wasn't a rebound, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by Melissa. It was a gradual awakening, a recognition of the genuine connection we shared, the effortless ease with which we navigated each other's worlds. I knew I had to tell her, to confess the feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. So I invited her to our usual spot, a cozy little cafe nestled in a quiet corner of the city. Emma, I began, my voice a little shaky, my heart pounding in my chest. There's something I need to tell you. She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern, her hand reaching across the table to gently squeeze mine. What is it, Adam? She asked, her voice soft, reassuring. I hesitated, searching for the right words, the words that would convey the depth of my emotions. I've realized something, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Something important. What's that? She asked, her eyes searching mine, a hint of anticipation in her voice. I've realized that I'm in love with you. I confessed, the words tumbling out of my mouth, a release of emotions that had been bottled up for far too long. She looked at me, her eyes widening with surprise, her lips parting in a silent gasp. And then, a slow smile spread across her face, a smile that lit up her eyes, a smile that reflected the love that had been blooming in her heart for just as long. Oh, Adam, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I'm so glad. You are? I asked, surprised by her confession. Of course I am, she said, her smile widening. I've been in love with you for ages, you silly goose. I stared at her, my heart swelling with a joy that was as unexpected as it was overwhelming. "You have?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," she said, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. "I have, but I never dared to hope." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, our fingers intertwining, our hearts beating in unison. "Hope for what?" I asked, my voice soft, tender. "Hope for this," she said, her gaze locking with mine, her eyes filled with a love that mirrored my own. "Hope for you." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the cafe, the gentle murmur of conversations, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had chosen Emma, not as a rebound, not as a consolation prize, but as a genuine partner, a woman who saw me, who valued me, who loved me for who I was, flaws and all. I had chosen the present, the effortless joy of a genuine connection, the love that was freely given, the love that I deserved. And as I leaned in and kissed her, her lips soft and yielding against mine, I knew that this was just the beginning of a love story that was meant to be. A love story that was built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and most importantly, effort.